We all know the name Spartacus, the gladiator who defied an empire, the slave who became a general, a symbol of freedom against impossible odds. His story is legendary, a tale of courage and rebellion that has echoed through the ages. But what we often forget, or perhaps choose to ignore, is the brutal, horrifying end to his story. It's a finale so grim that Hollywood often sanitizes it or skips it altogether. Today, on Darker Truths, we re pulling back the curtain to reveal the stomach-churning fate of Spartacus and the thousands who fought beside him. This isn't a story for the faint of heart. It is a chilling reminder of Roman cruelty and the true cost of challenging the most powerful empire in the world. The Third Servile War, as the Romans called it, raged for over 2 years, from 73 to 71 BC. What started with a small group of around 70 gladiators escaping from a training school in Capua swelled into a massive army of over 100,000 slaves, peasants, and outcasts. This wasn't just a rabble. Under Spartacus's brilliant leadership, it was a disciplined fighting force that repeatedly humiliated the Roman legions sent against them. They plundered their way through Italy, their numbers growing with every victory. For a moment, it seemed like the impossible might happen. It seemed the slaves might actually win. But Rome, slow to anger, was terrifying when finally roused. The Senate, panicking at the unprecedented threat so close to home, finally gave supreme command to one of its wealthiest and most ruthless citizens, Marcus Licinius Crassus. Crassus wasn't just a politician, he was a man who understood power, wealth, and most importantly, fear. He raised 6 new legions, adding them to the battered remnants of others, and marched south with an army of nearly 50,000 professional soldiers. He was determined to crush Spartacus, not just for Rome, but for his own ambition. Crassus was a man who believed in discipline through terror. Early in his campaign, after one of his subordinates engaged Spartacus against orders and was defeated, Crassus revived an ancient and brutal form of punishment: decimation. He selected one of his own legions, divided it into cohorts of 10, and forced the soldiers to draw lots. One soldier in every 10 was then beaten to death by his own comrades. Imagine that. Your friends, the men you fight alongside, forced to kill you as a lesson. This horrific act sent a clear message to his own men and to the rebels. Failure and disloyalty would be met with absolute brutality. Crassus was not playing games. The tide began to turn. Spartacus and his army, burdened by followers and loot, found themselves pushed further and further south, into the toe of Italy. Spartacus had a plan. He struck a deal with Cilician pirates to ferry his army across the strait to Sicily, where he hoped to reignite the slave rebellions that had occurred there years before. It was a brilliant move, a chance to escape the mainland and establish a new base of operations. But the pirates, after taking his payment, betrayed him. They sailed away, leaving Spartacus and his army trapped. Realizing their predicament, Crassus moved swiftly. He ordered his legions to build a massive wall of earth and timber, a line of fortifications stretching nearly 50 kilometers from coast to coast, effectively penning the rebel army into the peninsula of Rhegium. It was a monumental feat of engineering, completed in a remarkably short time. Spartacus and his followers were now caged. As winter set in, starvation and despair began to take their toll. The great rebel army was on the brink of collapse, but Spartacus was not one to give up. On a stormy winter night, under the cover of darkness, he launched a desperate breakout. His forces filled a section of the Roman ditch with earth, wood, and even the bodies of fallen comrades and animals, creating a makeshift bridge. A third of his army managed to storm across the fortifications and escape Crassus's trap. It was another testament to his genius and his army's desperation. However, this success also led to a fatal split. A large contingent of his forces, led by Gannicus and Castus, broke away, eager for more plunder and perhaps overconfident. Crassus hunted them down and annihilated them. Spartacus was forced to turn back to try and help them, but it was too late. His army was fractured and weakened. The final battle, the Battle of the Sila River, was the scene of utter desperation. Spartacus knew the end was near. The Roman Senate, impatient with Crassus, had recalled the legendary General Pompey the Great from Spain and Lucullus from the east. Crassus, fearing they would arrive and steal the glory of the final victory, was eager to force a decisive engagement. Spartacus, his escape routes cut off and his army dwindling, had no choice but to stand and fight. The historian Appian tells us that before the battle, when Spartacus's horse was brought to him, he drew his sword and killed it, declaring, "If I am victorious, I will have many better horses from the enemy. If I am defeated, I will have no need of one." He was going to win or die fighting on his feet, as an equal to his men. He then led his troops in a suicidal charge aimed directly at Crassus himself. He fought like a man possessed, cutting down 2 centurions in his path, desperately trying to reach the Roman general, but he was overwhelmed. Wounded in the thigh by a spear, he fell to one knee, but continued to fight, holding his shield, until he and the small group of loyal bodyguards around him were finally cut down and buried under a mountain of Roman steel. His body was so dismembered in the chaos that it was never definitively identified. The great leader was gone. The battle turned into a massacre. The rebel army, without its leader, collapsed. Thousands were slaughtered on the battlefield. But for those who weren't, a fate far worse than a quick death in combat awaited them. This is where the story takes its darkest turn. Crassus captured 6,000 survivors. To make an example of them, to burn a lesson into the psyche of every slave in the Roman Republic, he ordered a punishment of unimaginable cruelty. These 6,000 men were to be crucified, not in some hidden arena, but along the most famous road in Italy, the Appian Way. This ancient highway ran from Rome all the way to Capua, the very city where the rebellion had begun. Imagine the scene. For over 200 kilometers, a distance roughly from London to Bristol or New York to Philadelphia, crosses were erected. On each one, a captured rebel was nailed or tied, left to die a slow, agonizing death. Travelers on that busy road would have been forced to witness this horrifying spectacle for days. They would see men writhing in pain, hear their screams and moans, and smell the stench of death as their bodies hung under the hot Italian sun. It was a procession of torture, a gallery of suffering designed as the ultimate deterrent. It was Crassus's message to the world. This is what happens when you defy Rome. This is the price of freedom. The crucifixions were a slow and public death. Victims could linger for days, dying from a combination of dehydration, exhaustion, exposure, and asphyxiation, as their own body weight made it harder and harder to breathe. It was a spectacle of state-sponsored terror, a psychological weapon wielded with cold, calculated precision. Pompey, arriving from Spain, managed to mop up a few thousand rebels who had escaped the final battle, and he shamelessly tried to claim credit for ending the war. But everyone knew the truth. It was Crassus who broke the rebellion, and it was his terrifying display on the Appian Way that served as the war's horrifying epilogue. The story of Spartacus is more than just a heroic epic. It's a brutal look at the realities of power and the lengths an empire will go to maintain its control. The crucifixion of 6,000 men is a detail often left in the footnotes of history, but it is the true and tragic end of the dream of freedom for so many. It reminds us that behind the legends and the myths, there are often darker truths, far more horrific than we care to remember. Thank you for joining us on Darker Truths as we explored the grim fate of Spartacus's army. If you found this glimpse into the brutal side of history compelling, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you do not miss our next investigation into the shadows of the past. Let us know in the comments what other dark truths you'd like us to uncover. Until next time, stay curious,